welcome to this, my November and October reading wrap-up. October is included because I might have forgot to do a wrap-up for the month of October, but I didn't read that much in October anyway. So as is normal with these wrap-up videos that I do, first we will go from 1 star all the way up to 5. And let me tell you, there is something in every single star category, including, unfortunately, where we are going to start, which is the DNFs. Now, first up on my DNF list was an arc that I got called Cold Creek, and it is billed as a horror, which, yeah, I can get how it would be. Now, I say it's an arc read, it actually came out in 2022. It was just on one of these arc websites. I thought the premise sounded very, very interesting. So let's hear what that premise was and what grabbed me into downloading the damn thing. One fateful decision turns Raiden Morita's peaceful existence into a living hell. Forced to take part in unthinkable illegal acts in the name of entertainment, an underground organisation takes him far from home and keeps him under the watchful eyes of the Cutter, the sinister leader. If he attempts any form of escape, he will surely meet his demise. Seojun, the alluring hired hand, befriends Raiden and swears he'll help him and the other victims escape. The two of them fall fast into an unbreakable friendship, putting them under immediate suspicion. But they remain obedient to the system just long enough to think of a perfect escape. As days go by, what becomes more apparent goes well beyond brutality. It unearths long-buried secrets of Raiden's own past that are far more unsettling than he could ever imagine. So yeah, it sounded really, really interesting. It sounded like something I really would like to read. Unfortunately, I DNF'd it a few chapters in because it really wasn't horror. If your book of horror relies on body gore to skate past in the horror genre without having a story to back it up, then it's just splatter gore, it's not horror. And this is extremely graphic. If you have any trigger warnings, this would be it. The trigger warnings didn't really bother me. It is depraved, it is very descriptive of these depravities, except it seemed to be depraved for the sake of it. You know, going for the shock value to make up the fact that there wasn't actually a story behind it. So yeah, I DNF'd it because I just couldn't be arsed. I found it tedious to read, a crap story, and I just didn't care. I didn't care about the characters, not even the main character. I didn't care whether he was locked in a bunker and had to do depraved things, because you're not given enough time with him at the very beginning to gauge whether you like him or not. It is just like a few pages of what he's doing that day, and then he's thrust into this underground, depraved basement, and you just find yourself, well, who is he? Who is he? It just didn't, and I have DNF'd a lot more books this year than I did last year. Now, speaking of bad DNF books, here's another one. I DNF'd this one. This is The Last Raven by Helen Glynn-Jones. It was the first book in the new Locked Library Forbidden Wings subscription. And because of this book, I cancelled the subscription completely. Because if this is the tripe that they're touting, then that subscription box is not for me. It's very pretty. It is a very pretty book. I mean, look at it. It is really, really nice. It's really, really pretty. The foiling is absolutely gorgeous. It has the interior. The spread edges are lovely, but unfortunately it is very, very pretty with absolutely no substance whatsoever. I DNF'd it. And as I DNF'd it, I do have an unboxing of it somewhere up here. This is currently on eBay. I am selling it. Now we go on to our 1 stars. And there is only one book that got 1 stars this month, and that is The Red Queen by Philippa Gregory, and this is the lead up to the Wars of the Roses from Margaret Beaufort's viewpoint. In history, she's a very interesting historical figure. She is the mother of Henry Tudor, who went on to be King Henry VII, the father of Henry VIII. But in this, Philippa Gregory makes her one-dimensional, boring, blinkered, just no, it isn't, I don't think it's a true reflection of what the character actually was. And in reading some of Philippa Gregory's other book from around that historical period, such as The White Queen, her preference for Elizabeth Woodville as a character, as a historical figure, is staggeringly obvious. And as such, Margaret Beaufort, being on the other end of those scales against Elizabeth Woodville, fares very, very badly. For a historical period that is supposed to be incredibly, incredibly interesting, fraught with political upheaval and conniving, murderous people, it doesn't even go into the realm of being not very... I mean, Philippa Gregory's books aren't that accurate anyway. But it falls more into the realm of being the most heinous crime of being boring. Now, moving on to the 2 stars is this one, We're All Monsters Here by Amy Marsden. Now, I ordered this from Amazon because the blurb sounded like something that I would really, really like. So this is the blurb that got me and why this book is so heinous for a 2-star. When Anna is invited to a secluded retreat full of selfish, greedy humans, of course she doesn't say no. Not only did she manipulate the CEO of the world's largest oil corporation, Peter Bayer, into organising the 4-day-long getaway in the first place, but no self-respecting vampire would ever turn down such easy prey. Her weekend gets even better when she meets Sarah, one of Peter Bayer's employees, and they begin a whirlwind affair. Blood and beautiful women are Anna's idea of a great time. She should have known it was too good to be true. Hunters are dangerous, deadly, and dedicated to the cause of eradicating vampires. When a group of them turn up at the retreat, Anna must use her centuries of experience to escape their ever-closing net. Will she get out unscathed, or will they finally catch up to her? Will she give in to her intense and unexpected feelings for Sarah, or will she leave her to burn as she destroys all evidence she was ever there? Which, on the premise of it, should have been really, really good, really, really interesting. It's only a short little thing. However, the execution of it, it's like Killing Eve meets Twilight without the story. It leans a lot into the Killing Eve sort of roles. It just does not have the story to back it up. I mean, yes, Anna is extremely bloodthirsty and the descriptions of the carnage is descriptive for the whole 2 or 3 sentences that the author takes to describe them. It would have been better if she described them more, if she fleshed out the story a lot more. Than it's a novella, the story's going to be quick, but really did it have to be such in bullet points, really? It got to be a bit tedious. You wanted to get to the end. There was a lot of repetitiveness. She's billed as being this bloodthirsty, beautiful vampire, and yeah, she is, but she's a bit dull with it. You know, she's only got 2 modes. She's either asleep or she's, ripping somebody's throat out. There's no character design story behind it. So we are now moving on to our 3 stars, and here's where we get a few more. Now, first on our pile of 3 stars is Hex Hexability by Kate Johnson. And this was the Locked Library box for September pick. It's pretty, it's very, very pretty, it's very, very pretty, and its sprayed edges are really, really nice. Now, the story goes that Tiffany Worthington doesn't know that she's a witch, but whenever she looks at a painting or a picture, it moves. She makes it move. She makes it come to life. And then it's set in sort of a Bridgerton era. It's like where Bridgerton meets the witches. And it's nice. It's a good story. I have a full video on it and I will link that down below. It's nice. It's just nice. Now, next up is A Carnival of Carnage, and this was an ARC read for the month of October, and this was a great book. It's a collection of different short stories, all horror, some thriller, that all happen around different carnivals in or near Halloween. It's a great book. I only gave it 3 stars because just some of the stories I didn't like, some of them really, really loved, and on balance it gets straight in the middle 3 stars. So next up we had one of the first winter stories that I wanted to read. I picked up The Darkness Surrounds Us by Gail Lukaczyk. I'm butchering that, I know I'm butchering that. But one of the first reasons I picked this book up is just because of the cover. The cover reminds me of Penny Dreadful. And I thought, going into this, because of this cover, this would be along those same lines. Now, the blurb for this is: Nurse Nellie Lester can't escape death. Fleeing Chicago at the height of the 1918 Spanish flu, she takes a nursing job at a decrepit mansion on a desolate Michigan island. She's convinced the island holds the secret to her mother's murky past. The only problem? Her dead mother seems to have followed her there. Nightly she's haunted by a ghostly presence that appears in her bedroom. But is it her mother or something more sinister? When the frozen body of the prior nurse is unearthed, Nellie suspects her family's history and the nurse's uncanny death are connected to a mysterious group that disappeared from the island 24 years earlier. As winter closes in, past and present collide, resurrecting a lurid killer hell-bent on keeping the island's secrets. Will Nellie uncover her mother's shocking past before the killer enacts his final revenge? Now, usually I don't go in for books that are around sort of the wartime, 20s, 30s. It doesn't, usually that time period doesn't really interest me that much. But the blurb got me. I wanted to know what it was like, and it got 3 stars because it's good. The atmosphere that builds in, that it is slow. The tension that builds in this is very slow. And you're on an isolated island in the middle of winter, and everybody seems to have nefarious purposes. Nellie is our only point of view, and I would have liked to have other different points of view, but I get why there isn't. Nellie is a bit... She says that she's intelligent, except there's a murderer on the loose, and she goes accusing all and sundry to all and sundry. So she accuses the lord of the manor, her employer, to everybody that she knows is going to tell him. If you really believed he was the murderer, wouldn't you keep your trap shut? I mean, come on, girl. The island is dark, it's foreboding, it's covered in snow, it gets cut off in winter. It had the perfect premise for a fantastic ghost story, and the build-up was great. And I didn't manage to guess who it was at the end, which I thought was really, really good. But unfortunately, all the build-up, all the how many pages? Let's see. 321 pages of tension and build-up. It starts right at the beginning. Only to have the ending be wrapped up in 2 pages or less. I felt like I was shortchanged, and I felt like I was out of pocket. I wanted, for all that build-up, I wanted my payoff. I've worked hard to read this. It was slow. The tension built slowly. And to get all the way through and get to the end, and my big payoff was 2 pages, and the murderer was dispatched in a paragraph, and he didn't even go out in a blaze of glory. It was annoying. And that's why it only got 3 stars and not 5 or 4. Just because the ending let me down. Now, next up, to keep up with our winter reading, we have Upon a Frosted Star by M.A. Kuznia? I'm not quite sure. But this it gets 3.5. It is a retelling of Swan Lake, the ballet, which in its turn is a retelling of the lesser known fairy tale, The Stolen Veil. But having never heard of that fairy tale, having never seen Swan Lake, I didn't really know what I was going in for. It has a beautiful cover. I thought it was really, really pretty, perfect for winter. I really, really enjoyed it. And this is the blurb for it. The invitations always arrive the same way, without warning, appearing around the city on the first snowfall of the year, simply inscribed with "Tonight." When struggling artist Forster finds an invitation, he's bewitched by the magic of the evening. swept up in the glamour of this notorious annual party and intrigued as to who is behind them. Determined to find out more about the mysterious host, Forster discovers an abandoned manor silent with secrets and a cursed woman who is desperate to be free. It's one thing I would describe this book as is magical. The way she writes, the atmosphere is enchanting. The characters are not... You don't go deep with these characters. Although one thing I did like, it switches POVs. So you are in Forster's POV in the present time, and you are in Odette's POV back in 1922. But the switching between the 2 years, it is seamless. You don't get the juddering switch of going backwards in time to come forwards in time. It's not mind-blowing, it is an easy switch. Now, one of the most unexpected pleasures that I found with this book is that half of this book, the part that is from Odette's perspective in the past, is actually set in the city of York, which is where I live. So it mentioning the opera house, it mentioning the streets, them walking down the streets in the snow is all the more magic because I've walked those streets. I know what those buildings look like. I know what's down those roads. So yeah, I liked that. It's why it got it. It's half a star just for it being set in the same city as me. When I started reading this, I thought this would be 5. When I got about halfway through, I had taken it down to a 4. And by the time I'd finished, I took it down again. And one of those reasons is the passage of time in the summer months, where Forster is supposed to be finding a cure to this curse that Odette is under. For the months of summer where it doesn't snow for like March to October, he doesn't seem to do anything. In fact, he doesn't do anything. He just sits around moping artistically. But, I mean, the girl that you are obsessed with, you are obsessively in love with, she is cursed and you have the option to do something about it and you take your sweet ass time doing absolutely nothing except moping about, and you wonder why your friends are getting a little bit sick of you. If he could just get off his ass at least one summer, it would have been beneficial. Now, as if you've watched any number of my videos, you will know that I like a good villain. I like a good bad guy. Now, one of the most heinous things that somebody can do is have a bad guy and make him this ultimate antagonistic, so the really bad stuff devolves around his character, and then when you actually meet the character, you make him boring beyond belief. It is not good. The character of Rothbart, at least in this, I don't know about the play, and I don't know about the fairy tale, but in this, the guy was done a disservice and I felt cheated. Because when you are in Odette's point of view, back in time, the things that Rothbart does are heinous. The whole atmosphere around his character is palpable with villainy, and you hate him. And when there's a point in it where he snaps someone's neck, and I audibly gasped out loud because you didn't see it coming, it just happened like that. And I thought, that is a damn good villain, only to get to meet the guy in the current timeline, and my god is he dull and boring. And I can't spoil the ending, but a book this heavy could be used as a weapon, and I felt like using it as a weapon by the end, and that's why it only got 3.5 stars and not the 5 that I thought it was going to be, because do not make a villain boring when you have built him up and written him as bad, heinously awful, and a damn bad human being, and then get to meet him and him be boring and dull. But for all that, it is a magical read and you really should check it out. Now we are getting on to our 4 stars, and the first 4-star up was a book I read in October called The Eyes Are the Best Part. Now I've already done a review of this book and I will link that as well down below if you haven't seen it already. This was the Evernight horror book for July, I think. It is the most disgusting book I've ever read. Honestly, I almost gagged. It's just, the descriptions are just disgusting. It makes up for the lack of story that's in it, but Jesus Christ, it's bad. It's vile. Now, I said in my review video that I was going to keep it as a trophy that I actually got through it, but because I am never going to read it again, and it did get 4 stars, and usually I keep them, but I will never read this again. So this is also one that has gone onto eBay. And if you are unsure of what the story is, the artwork tells its story. Now, next up was another one from Illumicrate, and that was the Illumicrate October book, which is not a horror, and that is a heinous crime as well. But it is Until We Shatter by Kate Dillon. I have done a full review of this book, and I will link that also down. There's a lot going to be linked down below, but that will be linked down below. This is a YA fantasy / heist in a magical realm. I like it, it's fun. About halfway through it had me hooked until the very, very end. And the ending didn't disappoint me, which I thought was really, really good, especially considering the other ones I'd read this month. Now, another 4 stars was I Awaken in October, and this is a poetry book of Halloween poems. You can see all these little tabs I have with my favourites. I don't like reading poetry. I won't go out and, you know, I have to have the mood take me for reading poetry. This is a great little poetry book. One of the other 4 stars was the second book in the Skyrim Library trilogy. This one dealing with Man, Mer and Beast, and that one has a full review video on my channel already, so I'm not going to spend that much time talking about it. But if you're a fan of the game, I would check this trilogy out. Another 4-star was The Pumpkin Spice Cafe by Laurie Gilmore. If I wasn't mood reading when I read this, this probably wouldn't get 4 stars at all. It is usually not my kind of thing, but it was fun, it was cozy. I do have a review, I do have a full review video on this, but it was like a cuddle in a book. And if you are looking for a cuddle in a book, this is a perfect cuddle in a book. Now, one of the last 4 stars is Monstrous. It was the Butterfly Book Club book for October, one of the only book boxes that actually had a horror element in their book pick. This also has a full review on my channel already. It's YA, mythology, fantasy. I really, really enjoyed it. The only reason it didn't get 5 stars was the blood play. And it was a bit too predictable compared to another series that I have. If you like mythology, fantasy with lots of other stuff chucked in, this, I would definitely recommend it. I was hooked. From the first few pages, I was hooked at trying to find out who it was that was doing all the murdering. I love a good murder. I really, really enjoyed reading this. I would recommend it to anybody. But that is the end of our 4 stars, and we do have one 5-star. And that is the novella Heroes of Ferth by Benjamin Averin. And this is the novella of his brand new series, the Venomborn Saga. Now, if you have spent any time on my channel, you will know that I was an ARC reader for his last series, the Rainfall Trilogy. And I was lucky enough to be an ARC reader for all 3. So that is Salt in the Wound, Secret of the Thistle, and the last one, A Cask Age Blade. And if you've seen my spoiler-free reviews of these, you will know that every single one got 5 stars. Now, because this series is ended, I wasn't sure whether I would feel the same way about the new series coming. Thankfully, I did. The novella for Heroes of Ferth is very, very short at under 100 pages, so you can zip through it in a couple of hours. but it is a wonderful teaser trailer for the series starting next year. And from the very first paragraph to the very last sentence, it is packed full of action. It is non-stop. For a novella, it doesn't waste time with explaining a lot of things. You are thrust right into the action from the very first paragraph, and you feel like you're thrust into the action from the very first paragraph. So as I said, we are dropped headfirst into a losing battle, and we are on the losing side. And it's told from you interact with different characters, you get different POVs, and not one of those characters has plot armor to save them. And you are very well aware that no character is safe, and if that is what is coming in the Venomborn series, I am going to be a wreck when I read them. Whether I'm lucky enough to get them as an arc, or whether I pick them up at the moment that they come out, I'm just going to be a wreck when reading. I'm just going to be full of anxiety because nobody's safe. The snapshot with the world we get is very turbulent. So the world is inhabited by humans and the Venomborn, which are humans which are infused with magic venom and thus has magical abilities to use, except they're both feared and people try to purge them, which is why there's a battle going on in the first place. And this world is beginning to be inhabited back by creatures long thought dead, and creatures which inhabit the world anyway. Now you add into that mix a tyrannical king and an ongoing rebellion against said tyrannical king, and you have the recipe for a fantastic reading fantasy delight. I can't wait for the series to begin because it has whetted my appetite and I want the main course. As a starter, it works perfectly. I like the way his fantasy books are written because it doesn't, with some of the fantasy that I've read, it fluffs things out with romance and coziness and niceness, and that's all very well, but sometimes you just want a book that's, you're gonna get bloody and dirty and your characters aren't safe and it's a big fantasy world, and I have a feeling this is what that is going to give us. The little novella, Heroes of Ferth, certainly did. And if you want to go get it, I think it's available on Amazon, I'm not quite sure. Wherever it's available, I will link that down below because if you like fantasy, you will love this. And I say that as someone who primarily reads horror. I love this because it is a fantasy that pulls no punches, and I can't wait for the series to start. Now on to what I'm going to read in December. It is already December and I haven't read a thing. So yeah, this is the first week of December. I have read nothing. Now what I was trying to get, I have a big pile of books that I want to get through in December, and I know full well I will not get through them all. But the ones I specifically want to get through is Christmas and Other Horrors, which is a Christmas horror short story collection. Now another one is continuing the tradition of a story every day for Christmas is 25 Days by Paige Jacobson. It is a collection of short stories read once every day. Kind of like I did for the Advent of Winter last year as part of the Kickstarter. But where the Advent of Winter was fantasy, this is horror. It kept popping up on my adverts on all over my social media, like targeted ads, and boy was I targeted because I went out and bought it. But the cover, look at that cover. The stocking is dripping blood in the frosted snow. I can't wait to start it. You're supposed to read a story every day. I am behind by like 6 days because I haven't started it yet. Another book I want to get through is one that I got off BookTube and I can't remember who recommended it. But that is The Exorcism of Frosty the Snowman by John Schwerger. I'm bad at pronouncing. It's a little novella, but it sounds really, really interesting. Frosty is possessed and is eating the souls of children. It appeals to me. The other ones I want to get through, but I'm not quite sure whether I will or not, is The Dead of Winter by Sarah Clegg, and that details all the traditions around the world for the month of December. The Bear and the Nightingale, which is kind of a retelling of a fairy tale, but it's quite a chunky paperback with very, very little writing in. So the blurb for this one is, in a village at the edge of the wilderness of northern Russia, where the winds blow cold and the snow falls many months of the year, an elderly servant tells stories of sorcery, folklore, and the Winter King to the children of the family, tales of old magic frowned upon by the church. But for the young wild Vasya, there are far more than just stories. She alone can see the house spirits that guard her home, and sense the growing forces of dark magic in the woods. It sounds like something I would really be interested in, and I hope I get round to it. The last one is The Winter Spirits, and this is again a collection of short stories set in the month of winter. I hope I'll get through it all. I doubt I will, but here's hoping. So until the next video, which is probably coming out midweek, keep reading.